Today, politics has turned into a cold civil war. Immigration is one of the most divisive issues, hot with agendas, rage, and confusion. But what is the right amount of immigration? How do you know if a political decision is beneficial or downright suicidal? To answer these questions, we need to first understand the purpose of the state. Think of it like designing a ship. You can't decide on its size or layout without knowing its purpose. Is it meant to sail rivers, cross oceans, or fight space wars? Without a clear purpose, every decision is a shot in the dark. In the same way, political decisions without clarity on the state's purpose are dangerous. The state's virtue, just like the ship's, is how well it fulfills its function. And what is that exactly? Simply put, the state exists to protect and promote the flourishing of its citizens. That's its core. If it fails at this, it's a bad state. And there are so many policies that blatantly serve other interest groups today that we forget the government is supposed to be by the people, for the people. The West is being gaslit to stay in a toxic relationship with an abusive regime. Abuse starts in small ways, then it becomes normal. Soon victims start blaming themselves and asking for more. That's why we all need a good friend to snap us out of it, point out the abuse, and remind us of what a healthy relationship is supposed to look like. This is where the wisdom of classical thinkers like Plato and Aristotle and the founding fathers becomes invaluable. They wrote about the state in its origins and understood the principles of a healthy republic better than anyone. Why did Aristotle warn us that tyrants prefer foreigners? Why did Jefferson and Aristotle so fiercely believe in the healthy citizen as the foundation for a healthy state? And why are they both rolling in their graves right now, worried about America? Well, let's dive into it. Part 1. Civic Virtue and Social Cohesion. Aristotle viewed the state as a partnership for promoting virtue and the good life, where citizens work together for human flourishing. Jefferson, following this classical thinking, believed the state's primary function was to protect the natural rights of its citizens, aka life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. At its core, the state or regime is simply the organization of citizens. Whether it's Athens or America, a democratic state forms when a community decides how to govern itself to maximize mutual benefit. This is where civic virtue comes in. Civic virtue simply means we before me. It's the glue that holds a healthy republic together. Civic virtue is when citizens and leaders put the whole before themselves. This was heavily emphasized by Plato, Aristotle, the founding fathers, and anyone who can think straight about teamwork. But let's be real about human nature. Most people will only put others first if they feel deeply connected to them and are part of a larger family. The more powerful a shared group feeling is, the more people will put the team first. The more estranged a community is, the less fucks people give about the whole. Hence, civic virtue dies without social cohesion, or asabiya, as I covered in my last video. I'd argue that social cohesion is the true first principle for all human flourishing. It is the most vital part of any project, team, or state. It's also a basic human need as well. And any visionary leaders out there, take notes for your businesses, decentralized tribes, or communities. Social cohesion needs to be sacred. Without it, self-interest will dominate every venture and people will only do the bare minimum. No amount of guilt tripping will make people prioritize neighbors they don't feel connected to or sacrifice for a tribe they don't have pride in. Civic virtue only thrives when citizens feel bonded to one another. And this is what mass immigration destroys. When you add too many outsiders to any group, you risk losing the special bond that made that group awesome in the first place, that made that group unique. Now, outsiders who want to assimilate and join the cause are one thing, but mass immigration is totally different. For example, a Navy SEAL will sacrifice his life for his comrades, but if you fill his team with untrained civilians, foreign strangers, and even a few enemies, he will be confused about what he's fighting for. The tribal sense will collapse, social cohesion will be destroyed, and he will retreat to simply serving himself and his immediate circle. You can bring in outsiders, that's fine, but it needs to be regulated, and they need to be trained and valuable to the team, or else the team will resent the strangers who become burdens, or the team will just fall apart. Again, this isn't a moral stance. This is human nature. True democracy will only thrive when people feel connected, when they have shared group feeling and pride in the larger community. This was the original idea of the American Republic, a diverse set of tight-knit communities that all participate in one larger body. Without that social bond and self-governance, democracy dies and corruption thrives, because self-interest will lead on every single front. This is why anything that breaks the social bonds of citizenship is far more destructive than people imagine, because it also breaks down civic virtue. Part 2, Citizenship. Based on Aristotle and Jefferson, I define citizenship by 3 key factors. 1, private ownership and a personal stake within a community. 2, active participation in the political body. And 3, shared values and virtues with your neighbors. For Aristotle, citizenship was not a right given to everyone, but rather a status reserved for those who actively participated in the political life of the state. He believed that property ownership, particularly land, gave citizens a stake in the community and provided stability for its future. In my mind, this stake is the most important thing. Citizenship is about having a long-term stake in a larger project. When people don't own property or see a long-term future for their families in a town, they won't care or invest as much. For instance, do you maintain your yard as well, or your garage if you're renting a house? Probably not. Do you go above and beyond to meet your neighbors and foster community if you're transient? No. It is only ownership that ties individuals to the community and encourages long-term thinking. Without it, you get atomization. It's why business CEOs give equity, a share of the company, to other leaders they want on the leadership team. Ownership aligns self-interest with group interest. And this is why in the ancient world, citizens had to be landowners to some degree, because those who were voting had to be invested in the whole. Aristotle viewed the middle class, often comprising of these small landowners, as the most important group for maintaining political stability. In his view, a society dominated by a large landless class and a small, extremely wealthy elite would be doomed. When we bring in millions of low-educated, landless people, we are creating an expanded welfare state of peasantry. In California, for instance, most private farms have been bought up by mega corporations. The middle-class families have left, and immigrants work the lands with no hope of ever owning them. This is what happened in the late Roman Republic right before the fall. Land-owning farmers, the middle-class backbone of Rome, won great wars of expansion for the elites. The elites came back with more riches and slaves, buying up small farms and consolidating them into vast estates. The citizen farmers got outcompeted, lost their lands, and the lower class swelled. Social cohesion died. The plebs hated Rome, and Julius Caesar came along to burn it all down. That was the fall of the Roman Republic, and if I, in all my expertise, had to break it down, it came from mass immigration and loss of private land ownership. You see, small land-owning families anchor the power base in the middle class and the citizenry, and this creates a lot of health within a republic. With ownership comes responsibility, shared meaning, and a sense of belonging. Rooted communities of landowners tend to have higher self-reliance, social cohesion, and are essentially tyrant repellent. Hence, corrupt elites and tyrants who are trying to consolidate power and serve their interests will bring in foreigners. Landless foreigners and renters are dependent on the state elites. They are cheap labor, easy to manipulate, and worst of all, foreigners can be used as a weapon against citizens during regime changes. This was Aristotle's warning from over 2,000 years ago. Part 3. Immigration in America. Ultimately, the first duty of every state is to its people. When the people's best interest is treated as a secondary concern, you can be sure tyranny or corruption is secretly driving the nation. So who does mass immigration serve? Let's follow the money here. Definitely not the citizens. It's a huge detriment to the citizens and oftentimes a detriment to the immigrants. It really serves, number one, elites and conglomerates. Unskilled immigrants are cheap labor and cheap votes. Number two, it expands the bureaucratic welfare state. because it expands the managerial jobs and welfare programs of the government. And number 3, it serves the globalist agenda, weakening unique cultures and identities to create a homogenized, controllable population. A state that allows mass immigration at the expense of its citizens is betraying its citizens, and such regimes must be corrected or overthrown. Thanks for watching Wisdom Warriors. My name is Christian, and I'm looking for fellow creators and leaders to join us in our new Men's Academy. This is for people who do want to be a solution to the problems we see in the world. So if that's you, there's a link below to talk to me about that one-on-one. If not, you can click here for my last video on asabiya and social cohesion. Peace.